podcast that you're about to listen to may cause some listeners to remember the good things in life.
Well, hey there, happy innovators. How are you all doing today? I hope that you're doing okay. And I'm doing pretty good. I got myself a nice hot cup of coffee here. I suggest you go grab one yourself and maybe hang out with me for a little bit today. I know it's only been about a week since my last podcast was released, and I'm sure that you're all shocked that I'm making another podcast so soon. But, I'm kind of wrapping up the recording of the new Pipe Choir album. It's coming along very well. It's pretty much done. And, I had a little bit of free time, and I thought, I want to make a podcast because I had something on my mind that I wanted to talk about. And while I was kind of thinking up this podcast, I got an email from a fan who had listened to my podcast about preterism, the one about whether the second coming of Christ has actually happened already, that possibility. And, we had a little bit of a dialogue about it, and I asked him if it would be okay if I mentioned it in my podcast, and he said sure. So basically, what I wanted to talk about today along the lines of preterism in the Bible and religion and things like that, okay? Anything like that, any religion, anything that is, spiritually serious, I realize that, sometimes when I talk on my podcast, it's loose, it's informal, and, I'm always kind of coming from a place of like curiosity and wonder, not necessarily dictating to anybody what anybody should believe or whatever. Okay. But what I wanted to say ever since I released that podcast a few weeks ago was that it's been on my mind that I had talked about something so serious as, the second coming of Jesus and been so flippant about it, and it was on my conscience. Like, it bothers me because even though I wasn't teaching anybody a class on religion or anything like that, which I have done before, believe it or not, but this is not one of those times, on my podcast. I have to be careful about what I say and how I say it sometimes because, at least according to my belief system, okay, if I give somebody information about faith or religion that is wrong and it's inaccurate and they believe me and I mislead them with what I said, then I become culpable for that, and I put my own soul, my own salvation in jeopardy by having misled somebody down the wrong path. So I'm very careful about that. Now, when I was younger, that was not the case. I was raised Christian, so we're raised with this idea that we're supposed to proselytize. We're supposed to put out the information in front of people, especially those who have not heard it before, and make it known to them so that they have an opportunity at salvation. That's the idea, that's the thinking. But when I was a young kid, I was a kid. I was stupid, and I thought I was doing the right thing. And I think a lot of the times when I would talk about spirituality and religion, people would become offended by that because a lot of reasons. One, they didn't want to hear it, or I was a hypocrite. I would be talking about this knowledge that I have, but was I really living it out? Not necessarily. But like I said, I was a kid. I was stupid or whatever. So I learned over the course of time that I really should be careful about that because, like I said, it puts me in jeopardy when I tell somebody something spiritual or religious that steers them off the correct path, even though I believe it may be the right path. If it steers them off of the correct path, I am responsible for their soul. I did that. Okay? So when I talked about preterism a couple weeks ago, and I was talking about my ideas and my hypothesis and what might have happened or whatever, I should have precluded the statements I made with, the disclaimer that these are just my opinions. Okay? They are not fact. They are not, biblically endorsed. There's none of that. It's just, I heard a thing, I thought about it, and now I'm repeating it on my podcast. Now, to you, that may not seem like a big deal, but to me, it's the kind of thing that weighs on my conscience because I've learned over time that I really need to be careful with that. Especially because while I may know a lot of facts and I have a lot of knowledge about religions and religious practices, things like that, I don't know everything. I'm not a biblical scholar. I have no credentials whatsoever, other than I have a brain and I'm alive and I'm thinking, So just for the record, I wanted to get that off my chest. I guess hopefully by me having that discussion about preterism and the second coming of Jesus and the timeline that we live on and all that stuff, maybe it sparked your curiosity and it got you to the point where you wanted to look and see for yourself. And that would be probably like the motivation behind me even talking about it in the first place. So that's done. I don't have to think about it anymore. I said what I wanted to say, and now, I'll just get on with the rest of the podcast. Now, as I mentioned in the last podcast, I'm in the process, or I was in the process, of recording a new PC3 album called The Door of No Return. And I figured that it might serve people a little bit if I explained a little bit behind the album. The album will be coming out next week. So I thought it might be good to just talk about it a little bit. I don't know if that seems boring to you or, maybe it seems a little bit self-indulgent to talk about the record that I made on my podcast and blah, 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 all that. Trust me, if you're listening to this, that is really not the spirit in which I'm talking about this. I wanted to talk about the album, The Door of No Return, because it's an album that's particularly important to me, okay? As you all know, a while ago now, we're pushing about a year and a half ago, I had talked about it in an earlier podcast. A very, very dear friend, more than a friend, died. He passed away. He took his own life. And since that time, up until really today, I'm kind of grappling with the loss of him in my life and how it ended and how awful it is and how awful it probably will be forever. At least for me. And I'm kind of coming to grips with that idea that the sadness that I feel, while it's diminished a little, it's not completely gone, and I don't think it probably ever will be. But in the process of, dealing with this situation, I write songs. I deal in lyrics and poetry and music and emotions, all that stuff. That's what I do. So it was second nature for me to just, aim my intellect at this issue and to kind of talk about it in the hopes of getting it off my chest. And I kind of did that with The Bright Side of the Moon, the last Pipe Choir album. You know, it was kind of right when all this stuff happened. I was working on that record, and now it's been out for a little while now. It's doing really well. Kind of surprised a little bit at how well it's doing for me, you know. So, you know, after that album was finished, I started to work on this new PC3 album, and I had assembled, you know, just a couple of songs, really, a couple ideas that I thought would be good for an album. And I kind of, in them, you know, had recognized a theme a little bit. You know, you build on things, you come to conclusions after you listen to things, and, you know, it's a process in and of itself. And, you know, I got the idea, you know, I'm going to do an album about this friend of mine. Not so much him, but really kind of like the city that he used to live in, and a city that I spent a lot of time in. And I mean, I could tell you, it was like Christmas break from school, I'd spend it there. Thanksgiving was there, you know, any summer vacations were spent there. 4th of July was there at this house in this town, a very small town in Ohio by the name of Avon, A-V-O-N. A small name, small town. And at the time, you know, that town was really kind of underdeveloped. That there was not a lot of stores and houses, and really not a lot of streets, not a lot of paved streets. A lot of the streets were gravel or dirt even, you know. And I lived more in the house that I grew up in as a kid. I lived more like in a suburb, like in a metropolitan kind of setting. A lot more concrete, a lot more supermarkets, a lot more shopping malls, that kind of stuff. But when I would go to Avon, it was almost like a retreat to the countryside. Now, the irony being that my cousin, when he came to my house to sleep over or hang out or whatever, it was like Shangri-La for him, because it was so different from where he lived. I mean, the stores were all within walking distance. There were kids everywhere, streets everywhere, parks, basketball courts. I mean, you name it, you know. And my cousin was a really big athlete, so it's kind of cool, I guess I can say, that when my father purchased the house that I grew up in, it had a very big piece of land on the side of the house. So the backyard wasn't very deep, but the side yard was huge. And we built a baseball diamond out there, or we'd play football out there. And my cousin would come over, and he just loved it, you know. It was fantastic. I have a lot of great memories, you know, playing baseball and football out in that field with all the kids in the neighborhood, my brothers, you know, my cousin, you know, everybody would be kind of hanging out, having a good old time playing baseball or football or whatever we were doing. And actually, I remember a couple of times when my father would come home from work while we were playing out in the side yard, and he would just stand there. You know, he would get out of the car with his lunchbox and his uniform on, and he would stand there and just for a few minutes just watch us all playing baseball, you know, and then he'd go in the house or whatever. But I always thought that was kind of nice, like that memory, because my father was like really, really happy that we were safe and we were in the yard having fun and playing sports and everything. It mattered a lot to him. And, you know, I can say too, now that I'm thinking about all this, that my cousin Jeffrey, that was his name, was really loved by my father. And they had a relationship that was separate from me and my brothers. Like my dad just really loved this kid, you know, and Jeff was like a good kid. He was funny, he was strong and athletic, and he was honest, and he was just always really funny and everything, easy to get along with. And my dad just loved him. And I have these memories of like him and my dad. For some reason, they both liked green onions. This is the kind of shit that I remember, right? They both loved green onions a lot, like raw. And so whenever there was like a family get together or a family gig, there would be a pile of green onions, and my dad and Jeff would sit down together and talk, and they would eat these green onions, dipping them in salt and then crunching on them, and I guess that's a little bit off the wall, but it's one of the good memories, and I think that's what I wanted to talk about today, really, about my cousin Jeff and the album that I released, about the town that he grew up in and that, basically I grew up into, Avon, Ohio. And I wanted to talk about the good things, not the sad things and all that. I mean, there's some of that too, no doubt, it's unavoidable, but it really was such a great time. And up until the point where he eventually passed away, there were some ups and downs, but really, it was really a great life with him. Overall, it really was. There were a lot of mistakes that were made and a lot of hurt feelings and those things, but man, was there a lot of love. And I wanted to talk about that today, Well, back to the PC3 album idea thing. I decided to call the album The Door of No Return, which was a name that I had been kicking around for a while, but I thought that it was really apropos to the sentiment of what I was singing about in this music that I was making. That it wasn't so much about the door of no return being a door that he closed and I can no longer follow him. I can't go through that door yet. Not like that. It was more like hitting this moment in my life where I realized that all of the things that were kind of like the pillars in my life, like emotionally, not all of them, but most of them, like my mother, my father, the house I grew up in, my best friend since childhood, they had all in a very short period of time disappeared out of my life. And it's difficult, it's difficult to get my head around all that sometimes. And I started to see, or I guess I started to look at the house that I grew up in, the memories of my dad, memories of my mom, and my family, really, the town that I was raised in, and the people that I knew, and the places that I went, and all those things that are associated with, home, my home, where I started out. It's not where I live now, but it's where I started, that is the door of no return. It's a door it's my door, I can't go back anymore. And I am an extremely sentimental person, probably to a fault, and probably even maybe to the point of being a little weird, about it. I just really become attached to things, and not everything, of course, but there were a few things in my life that I wasn't really prepared to let go of. And, for all of you out there that have lost somebody or something, which is, probably pretty much everybody, as you have no choice. You have no choice. And I released on the Bright Side of the Moon, I released a song called White Flag. In the chorus of the song, I'm saying that love is surrender. And what I mean by that expression is that when you love somebody or something like completely, unconditionally, you love something, for all of you out there who understand what unconditional love is for something or someone, it's a form of surrender because you are invested in this person or this thing or this place or whatever it is so much, and whatever they decide to do, or like whatever fate hands you in regards to that thing or that person that you love unconditionally, okay, you have to accept it because your love is unconditional, and you have no control over what people say or do or go or whatever. We don't have any control over that. And it's a very kind of emotionally vulnerable position to be in. And, this all to me sounds like a bit touchy-feely and like, oh, it's like all feelings and stuff and all that. But really, that is what I am talking about. You know what I mean? This is not showbiz. This is real with a capital R. I mean, I really am processing all this, and the music and all that helps, and songs like White Flag help, and this album, this PC3 album, The Door of No Return, helps. I'm processing it. And I'm sure that when you listen to, or if you listen to, that new PC3 album that's coming out next week, that you'll probably be able to gather what I'm talking about anyway, but I figured it would serve the album a little bit to give you a little bit of a heads up about what exactly I'm talking about. And, this city of Avon, 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 Ohio. It's a little town that I love so much. I spent a lot of time in, and oh my gosh, has it changed since I was a kid. I mean, it is literally unrecognizable to what it used to be. It is so built up, and there's stores everywhere. It's what my city used to look like. Okay. It turned into that. It's a metropolitan little suburb. But long before that, back in the 80s and stuff, when my cousin and I were, high school age, and, he was a year older than me. So, when I hung out with him, I kind of just like went along with whatever he wanted to do. Right. And of course, by the time we were 18 and 19 or, 16 and 17, we had hung out so much and done so many things already together, like since we were little children, that I was game for like whatever he wanted to do. So it was kind of cool because when I went out to Avon to hang out with him as a young man, like a young adult, a lot of his brothers, because he came from a family of 7, I came from a family of 6. A lot of his brothers had moved out of the house. They were gone. They were adults, and they were working and had families and stuff. And him and I were about the same age, but my brothers and sisters were still in the house. Okay, they were much younger. So, at least for the most part. Okay, so when I went out to Avon, it was really a different kind of feeling. My aunt and my uncle were kind of a little more relaxed about the rules. They had raised, 5 boys and sent them out into the world, and they were kind of like in a different place. Financially, they were more comfortable. They were, they had a little more of everything, because they had done their duty. They had raised their kids and sent them out into the world. However, my cousin Jeff and his younger sister were still in the house. So when I showed up there, it was like a stark contrast from where I came from. You know, like when I would go home, I was like fighting over cereal and food and stuff like that with my brothers and sisters. Like we were still in the house together, and you know, that's just the way it was. And I was young. I was the second youngest, you know. So, you know, it was like almost like a vacation to go out to Avon, which, you know, I loved going out there anyway, but really, it was really that way. And it was just so much more relaxed, and you know, they had cool stuff like a swimming pool and a lot of area to play and run around, and you know, there weren't as many rules. My aunt was really generous with us, and she would give us money for candy, and we would go up to the chemist shop, you know, down the road. It was the name of the store, the chemist shop. And we would go buy candy, or we would go to Papo's Pizza in Avon, Ohio. You know, it's still there, you know. I would go there with him, and we would get a pizza and just have a good old time. Just a lot of independence and a lot of freedom. And, you know, we got older, and we got into high school and the party scene in high school. And let me tell you, the parties out in Avon were very different than the parties that I went to where I grew up. Okay. And, oh my gosh, you know, to be completely honest with you, it was almost as if there was no adult supervision over anything that was going on. And, you know, my cousin and all his friends from school, you know, they were in high school, and you know, they were having these parties, and, you know, alcohol was just like part of the deal, you know? I mean, everybody was drinking, everybody was getting hammered, myself included. And it just became this thing that we started to do. And it was almost like every weekend, you know? It was a lot. It was often. And it was kind of messed up too, because these guys and my cousin, they all like got together and they built this fort, like this clubhouse out in the middle of nowhere, like out in the middle of the woods, like the middle of nowhere, and far, far, far away from any, you know, cops or adults or whatever. Okay. And it just became, it's almost like it's a movie, actually, when I'm thinking about it. It just became this thing that we would do. It was crazy. It was crazy, but it was so much fun. I mean, it was so fun. And it got a little out of control sometimes, you know. It was like a movie. I mean, it was like when you watch a movie and they show like a party and there's like a house full of people. I mean, there's people in every room. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on. People swinging from chandeliers. You know, that's what these parties were like. And, you know, they would have these parties out in the middle of the woods in that fort. And I have so many memories of that. It's kind of like almost like it was a dream. It's hard for me to believe it was ever that way, that him and I were that young and that we were, you know, getting into that much trouble and having the time of our lives, laughing ourselves to tears. And that came and went. You know, eventually it got old for me, and I started to play in a band, and we were busy a lot, and I was doing a lot of gigs with the band that I was playing in high school. So I stopped going out there as much, but the parties didn't stop. You know, that kept going even while I wasn't there. You know what I mean? So I would get reports from him about what happened and who was there and all that. And it was like, you know, I kind of felt a little bit bad I couldn't be there. But in a way, I kind of didn't mind because, believe it or not, I never really liked alcohol. I don't really like the taste of alcohol, and I don't like the feeling of being drunk very much, like being out of control of my motor activity, you know. I didn't like it, so it was probably like a much more productive use of my time to be in a band and to be, you know, showing up on time and rehearsing and focused on something that was positive rather than going out into the middle of the woods and getting snockered with my cousin and all of his friends, right? But it's one of those things that I wanted to talk about because it was a good memory. You know, not all the memories are gloom and doom, and not all the memories are about how it ended. You know, there was so much good and so much fun and so much history, you know, and I guess this was probably the last time I'm ever really going to talk about this stuff because the album's going to be released. I kind of see it as like the closing of a book, the closing of a door, the door of no return. And I'll, of course, never stop thinking about it and probably talk about it with my wife like I do, but I don't think I'm going to speak about it publicly anymore. I'm not saying I'm not going to, but I'm probably not going to. So this will probably be it. I just figured that I would kind of share a few stories about him and I and give you, you know, the listeners, an idea of like what exactly the album PC3, The Door of No Return is all about. You know, when we were really little, you know, I told you that he had a swimming pool in his backyard, and it was an above ground pool. It wasn't a built-in pool, but it was probably maybe like 5 feet away from the back door of their house. So you step out the back door, you step onto a deck, and that deck went around their swimming pool. But the reason I'm bringing that up is, well, one, that's the swimming pool that I learned how to swim in, and my cousin taught me how to swim in that pool. Okay, so and to this day, like I've mentioned this before, I know for sure, I'm like a fish out of water. I love swimming. I could hold my breath for a really long time. I could swim down to, you know, deep depths of water. And, you know, I love being in the water. I love it. And that's like because of him. You know, he really kind of showed me the ropes, you know, kind of like a big brother. He kind of showed me what to do, how to swim, you know, all that kind of stuff, just all of it. And what's funny is, and the reason I'm bringing in the story of the swimming pool up is because I have this distinct memory of my cousin when he was younger. He was much more daring than I was and a little more wild than I was. And he was like a monkey, you know, and just I don't know, just crazy. You know, he was wild, you know, and he would somehow get up onto the roof of his house. And we were like really little kids now. I'm talking like kindergarten, like 5 years old, 6 years old, maybe 7 or 8 years old, maybe. Okay. But he would run off the roof, clear the deck, and then land in the pool, you know? And of course, there's like no way in hell I was ever going to do that. But I would watch him do it over and over again. And it was so funny because no one cared and he didn't get in trouble or anything. And when I think about it now, it's like, you know, if he would have just slipped or made a mistake or whatever, and he didn't clear the edge of that pool, he would have been hurting, you know? And fortunately, he cleared it every time, you know? But I have this distinct memory, even to this moment right now, as I'm telling you the story, I have this distinct memory of this skinny little kid, with a shaved head, in shorts, you know, running and jumping off the roof, probably a good 7 or 10 feet, and clearing the deck and landing in the pool and laughing his ass off, and then getting out of the pool, climbing up and doing it again. And I would just like applaud, you know, there's no way I was doing that. But what a memory, right? I mean, that's the stuff that, closing that door of no return, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard. when I think about that stuff, you know? Yeah. And you know, a few podcasts back, I had talked about how I was drumming in a band and we went on the road and Jeff went with me, you know? And it was the best time I've ever had in my life. Without question, it was the best. It was the funnest time I've ever had in my life. And I knew that while we were doing it. I knew it. It was so fun. But right around that same time, which I think was probably 1996, like around there, I was still playing in that band that I talked about, Slow Bob. I was playing for them. And Kiss, the original lineup for Kiss, the band, the rock band Kiss, had decided to get back together for a tour. And, you know, when Kiss had last toured with all the original members, it was like 1978. I was like 7 years old. You know, there was like no way in hell I was getting to that concert, you know? So when they broke up and, you know, Peter Criss quit and all that stuff, it was like really disappointing to me that I was never going to really be able to see them in concert. And so in 1996, they announced that the original lineup of Kiss was getting back together. And of course, you know, me and Jeff and my brother Steve and the two guys from Slow Bob, okay, all bought tickets for the concert. And we went, and it was really kind of a amazing experience because Jeff and Steve, my brother, and myself really were given an opportunity to kind of just like lose ourselves in nostalgia and let go and just have a great time rocking out to these Kiss songs that we grew up listening to together, and were so important to me, you know, in my formation as a young musician. You know, I just thought Kiss were like superhuman. I thought they were so cool. And so we got to go to this concert, and it was so much fun. And it was also interesting because the two guys that I was in the band with, they were kind of like a little bit, I think they were a little bit confused by how much fun we were having, and they were not having that much fun. But Steven, Jeff, and I were having the time of our lives. You know, it was like reliving our childhood together. And, you know, finally the dream comes true. We were able to see them, you know, in concert. But we're adults now, and we've got money, and, you know, we're all set. We can do whatever we want, you know. So it was just one of those memories where it's like, I just don't remember like letting go like that ever. Like not that much, where it was like, I just went off. I had so much fun at that concert, you know, and I'll never forget that. And I wanted to talk about that. You know, I wanted to talk about that Kiss concert back in 1996. It was awesome. Oh, it was so awesome. I can't believe that actually happened. You know, when I think about the memory of it, and just when I think about how much fun we had, and it was us together. We were adult men, but it was like being a kid again, you know? Oh, it was great. It was great. What a great memory, you know? And actually, you know, right around that same time, you know, it was one of those times where Jeff and I had kind of reconnected after like a little bit of a, you know, a break from each other, you know, how friends do. You know, you get into an argument or something, and, you know, you have a disagreement of some kind, and then you split off, and yeah, eventually over time, you know, you forget why you were even angry in the first place, and you find your way back to each other, and you just pick up right where you left off. Everything's all right, you know. So this was one of those times, you know, with the Kiss concert, All that. This is like Jeff and I coming together after a pretty long break from each other. He had gone to college, and then he came back after 4 years. And yeah, I saw him a couple times when he was in college, but this was really kind of like the first time I'd seen him in like 4 years, you know? So we spent a lot of time together. We were hanging out together. We actually lived together in a duplex, you know, a double house for a while. It was great. Okay. It was great. But there was this restaurant in the city that we lived in, which was a city called Lakewood, Ohio. Pretty big city, right on the outskirts of Cleveland, you know, right on Lake Erie, like right on the lake. And there was this seafood restaurant in Lakewood, Ohio, called Barnacle Bill's. I can't believe I'm telling you this story, but because I mean the only person who knows it really is my wife. But basically what had happened was Barnacle Bill's had this deal where you pay like one set price. I forget what it was, maybe like $20 or $40, and then you could eat all the crab legs that you could eat. Okay. Well, you know, Jeff and I heard about this and we were like, oh, hell yeah. So we go to Barnacle Bill's, we throw our cash down, and we just start eating crab legs. Okay. And they would serve you the crab legs like in buckets, and maybe like a pound in each bucket. And we would eat so much crab. It was like we would eat until we got sick, and we were like seeing who could hold out the longest, like who could eat the most crab legs, right? And I think I won most of the time because I was like a little bit bigger than Jeff. But it would get so crazy that the waitresses that were taking care of us would start to get like a little pissed off that we were still eating, you know, and still sitting at the table, I guess, you know. But we did not give a shit what they thought or what anybody said. We were just sitting there almost like looking each other in the eye, like, I'm going to eat more. I'm going to eat more. Oh yeah, watch this. I'll eat 2 more. And we just would eat probably like 14 pounds of crab legs or something in the time that we sat there. Maybe more than that even. I don't even know. But like I said, it was enough to like piss the staff off at the restaurant. Like they, you know, they weren't happy about somebody eating that much crab for the low price of $40 or whatever it was, right? But we would get like the sweats, you know. We would kind of like get ill. Like we had so much crab in our body that we were ill, you know, almost ready to Ralph, just barely not puking, you know. So much crab, like so much. And I think they had like coleslaw and maybe like biscuits or something. Yeah, we ate some of that too, I guess. But really, it was about crab legs. And it was so funny. For like maybe 5 years, we would go there like every other month, you know, until they finally had to shut down the all-you-can-eat crab. Oh my gosh, that's such a funny story. I'm sorry, you're probably bored to tears, but for me, oh, it's so funny. It's so funny. What a great memory. What a great memory. You know, and over the years, like, you know, from that time on, you know, buffalo wings became a big thing in America, you know, the bar food, buffalo wings. And, you know, Jeff and I both were totally on board with the buffalo wings, you know, wild wings, particularly a place called BW3's that, you know, had opened up shop in the city of Lakewood in a small little corner store kind of thing. And, you know, they served like burgers and fries and, you know, deep fried this and deep fried that and buffalo wings and all that, you know, beans, all that kind of stuff, like barbecue stuff, right? And, oh man, Jeff and I would hit that place and we would just put away some wings, you know? And not quite as crazy as Barnacle Bill's, but it was one of those things that became kind of like a tradition. You know, if I saw him or if he saw me, if we were getting together somehow, we would go to BW3s together and with our wives and with whoever wanted to go, but him and I would go. And I guess the reason that I'm bringing that up is because on the very last day that I spent with him, the very last thing we did, okay, after a day of kind of running around and doing things, we went to BW3s together. Him and his family and me and my wife, we all went, and his sister, she was there too, Weezer. That's her nickname, Weezer. What a name, Weezer. I love that girl. Anyway, love her like a sister. So Weezer, if you're hearing this, you know already, because I probably told you like last week. I just love you so much. But we went to BW3s together. My cousin Jeff and his wife and kids and his sister and my wife. We were there at a big long table at BW3s. And we were like the only people there. It was earlier in the day. And there was a rainstorm, I remember, happening outside. It was raining really hard. And we had a good time. You know, it was like old times. And this was after him and I hadn't spoken for almost 11 years. So it was the first time I had seen him in 11 years. And we went out for food and had a great time like we always used to do, you know. And I had no idea, really, that it was the last day I was ever going to see him. And actually, what's really strange about it is that before we went to BW3s, I wanted to go to the cemetery where his parents were buried because I don't live in Ohio anymore, and I wasn't able to make it back to Ohio for my aunt's funeral. So, you know, she was really kind of like a second mother to me, you know, and I was really disappointed that I couldn't make it. And that was a whole different story of all the bullshit that was going on with the airfare and the airlines and all that. We had booked a flight, we were gonna go, and then they canceled the flight that we were gonna be on, so we wound up not being able to go. But anyway, I wanted to go while I was back in Cleveland for my parents' funeral. I wanted to go to the cemetery where his parents were buried so I could pay my respects and, you know, put a flower on the grave. And it was really, really great. You know, we spent the first part of the day going to mass together at church, and we made our way out to the cemetery out in the back of the church in Avon, where, you know, I had grown up and he had grown up, really. And I got to see his parents' grave, and we sat there for a while, like me and him, my wife, his sister, and their kids. You know, we all kind of sat there for a little while around the grave, and we were just reminiscing and talking. And I had no idea really at the time, but my wife had decided to videotape us talking, you know, and I didn't know. And so we're sitting there talking, and we were just laughing and scratching, you know, just laughing so hard, and you know, talking about the way things used to be, you know, all that stuff that happens, and oh, remember when, and oh, it was so funny when this used to happen. Oh my gosh, I forgot all about that, and blah 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 blah. Right, you know, and oh, it was just like being in heaven, you know, just talking to him again and laughing again. And not having any bad blood or any kind of bullshit, you know, nothing. No, nothing. Just him and I and his sister, I guess, you know, kind of entering that space again, just like, you know, I guess it was going to be one last time. I didn't realize that, though. And had I realized that, I probably would have acted differently and said things differently and stuff, but I had no idea. But, he did say while we were at the cemetery looking at his parents' grave, he said to me, when I die, I want to be cremated and I want my urn to be buried right there between my parents. And I thought, okay, that's your prerogative, cremation and all that. Okay, whatever. Not thinking that, I guess maybe even at that moment, like he might have known that he was going to do this to himself, and he was letting me know what he wanted, what his wishes were for whatever reason. And it's a little bit creepy, I guess, but I had no idea, and that was earlier in the day when we were at the cemetery. Then after that, we went to lunch, of course, at BW3's, and it was really strange because, like I said, when we were at the restaurant, it was raining really hard outside. So when we were leaving, my wife and I were going to go back to our hotel room and kind of get ready to head back to Massachusetts. Before I could say anything, or before we even said goodbye or anything, he ran out of the restaurant towards his car, and he unlocked the car and he got in, really, really quick because it was raining really hard. And he didn't say goodbye to me or anything, I didn't even realize that he had left the restaurant. But okay, so I pop an umbrella, my wife and I walk out to the car, and I could see him through the window of his car with all this rain coming down. I could barely make out his face, but it was like knock, knock, knock on the window, like, okay, bye, goodbye, see you later. And I had no idea, that was it. That was the last time I was ever going to see him. Pretty much the last time I was ever going to talk to him in person. And that was it. That was the end. Now, of course, this was like in April, and he wound up, doing what he did in July. So it was months later that he did it. But, I talked to him on the phone a couple times and stuff in between, but I had no idea what was going on in his life, really, and where he was at mentally and emotionally or whatever. All I know is that when I saw him on the last day, we were laughing like we always have, and believe me when I say to you, it was really, for me, it was like heaven, because I missed him so much. And he had become a little bit of a recluse, I guess. And we had the chance to reconnect one more time. I consider it a gift from God, because God knew my heart and what was on my heart and how I felt about him and how things had gone with him, between him and I. It was a gift from God to me, and I had no idea. So I made this album, right, called The Door of No Return, and this is my way of closing the book, closing the door, I don't want to think about all this as much as I do, like forever. I don't want to. I want to forget most of it, a lot of it. I want to move on, and but and I am. But it's really it's real, it's real sadness. Like, it's not superficial. It's very, very deep. I lost my parents, and that was really hard. That was really sad, but they were older. They were my parents. You expect that to happen in some way, It would have been a tragedy if I had died before them, But Jeff, Jeffy boy, that's what I used to call him. or Jeffrey Joper. My dad called him Jeffrey Joper. I don't know why my dad called him that, but I started calling him Jeffrey Joper or Joper, and then it turned into Jeffy Boy, you know? Jeffy Boy, Jeffy Boy. I just loved him. I'm just saying his name. I just loved him, you know? Every once in a while, I'll be, doing something, some menial task, or editing a drum track or something, and he'll pop through my mind, and I'll just say his name, Jeffy Boy. Oh, I loved him. And this album is a tribute to him and to his mother, whom I loved like a second mother, and his father, who was a character and really, his father was a very interesting character. He had a very dry sense of humor, and you couldn't really tell when he was being funny, but he was very often. And he was very, very close to my father, even though they were brothers-in-law. They had a relationship separate from everybody else, and long-standing relationship, a very close one. They relied on each other because they were both young fathers that were starting their young families, and they had a lot of kids and a lot of bills to pay or whatever, so they kind of leaned on each other a little bit. And of course my mother and his mother were sisters, so they spent a lot of time together and talked to each other a lot on the phone. And their family and my family were really kind of like one big family, and I considered Jeff and his brothers and his sister like my brothers and sisters. They were not cousins, they were more than that. Even his oldest brothers and the guys that were grown-ups by the time I was 5, they were not just cousins to me or to my brothers and sisters. Like, we were all together. I can't believe it was ever that way, but it was. Maybe that's a little too personal, but okay, time for me to be quiet. I just wanted to talk about it for the last time in a podcast right before the album is released. It's a short album. It's only got 5 songs on it, and I thought that was just right. Just right. It's short, sweet, and emotional, because that's really all I can say. But with that, my happy innovators, thank you for listening. If you got this far into the podcast, thank you for that. And I guess check out the new PC3 album, The Door of No Return, when it comes out next week. And with that, my happy innovators, remember this: if you want to keep what you've got to give it away. Take it easy, everybody. Okay, happy innovators, for all of you that were kind enough and generous enough with your time to stick around to the end of the podcast for some music, what I'm going to share with you today is a song from a forthcoming pipe choir album, not the one that I'm working on right now. This is a different one. Basically, it goes like this. When I was working on the Bright Side of the Moon album, I had a version of the album that I had put together maybe 10 years ago, and I had forgotten that I had done that, and I found it, and it had this song order. Now, this was right when I was deciding, okay, now I will work on the Bright Side of the Moon album, I found this old version of the album that had all these old versions of songs on it. And I had a running order, a track list of songs, and some of them had been released already, like A Midnight on Jake Way, and Mapping the Stars, and Sedusa. There were a bunch of tracks on this old Bright Side of the Moon album that had already been released. So I said to myself, what I'll do is this. I'll make the Bright Side of the Moon album, okay? I'll do the exact same songs, the exact same running order, only I'll include the newer versions of the songs. So I kind of thought that, well, what I'll do is I'll release the songs that nobody's ever heard before, but then I'll work on the songs that I've already released, and I'll make alternate versions of those. That way I'm not kind of like, copping out by just like throwing on old songs. It's like, let's make it a whole new album, So I did that. I worked on all these songs. I worked on a new version of A Midnight on Jake Way, Mapping the Stars, Sedusa. I can't remember them all. Return to Zero. All these songs that were supposed to be on the original album, and I had redone them. Do you follow what I'm saying? I'm probably just meandering. Anyway, the point is that I reached a point with the Bright Side of the Moon where all the new songs were done. All the songs that nobody had ever heard before were finished. But I was still working a little bit on these redos, and I thought, I'm going to exclude all these redos that I've done. I'm going to take them off the album. I'll release only the 10 or 11 songs that were new, brand new. No one ever heard them before because they were new. And release that as the finished album called The Bright Side of the Moon. And I would take all those redos that I did, and maybe make a couple other ones that I hadn't made yet, put together an album of redos. And that album is going to be coming out, probably within the next month. It's really kind of like a pipe choir wrap-up. It's not really a new album. It's just newer versions of songs that you've already heard before that I took the time to make. And, taking the idea of waste nothing, I'll take all those songs that I did not include on the Bright Side of the Moon, and I'll put them on their own album, and I'll call it something, and I'll release it to my fans. And if they don't want to hear it, they don't have to listen. And if they're interested in that kind of thing, cool. I have it available for you. I did the work, so I might as well release it, right? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to let you hear one of those newer versions of a song that you've heard before. I have a song called Circuit Freaker that I released, and I redid it. Like I gave it a facelift. I made it into like a new song, really. So that's what you're going to hear today. I'm going to let you hear the new and improved version of Circuit Freaker, and hopefully you'll like it. So without further ado, here we go. The old song Circuit Freaker redone. Let's check it out. Take it easy, everybody.
And I love that.
So
And Mom's
funny.
like, sure, you can ride the rear before on Ann's bike.
You would
can't
laugh
go
so
to
hard.
And I say, guess what?
Dad would take
There will
it
be
on the
one
chin,
day
and he'd say,
that I
"Dad,
will
let's
be
take
Mom's
I'll
favorite.
take care of it." So he had to put up with her for a week because he went